1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's a lot of age gap going on here and they both die. I just wanted to be involved. I didn't want to feel left out. So, and one thing leads to another. Just felt a bit political and maybe in a bit of an obnoxious way. I'm a bit embarrassed to talk about. The math wasn't math there, but that's okay. But 2.5 stars is average, and that's exactly what this book was. I can't explain to you guys how mad I am at myself right now. There is no one to blame for my frustration but myself. Hi. For starters, welcome back to another video. My name is Christy and I love books, I love book content, so I love doing reading wrap-ups, and that's what we're here for today. So this is my October reading wrap-up and I'm very excited to talk about the books that I've read in October. But before I do that, I just want to address something. I might seem a little frustrated to you, and the reason I'm frustrated is because I've just recorded the entire video only to find out that 40 minutes worth of content ceases to exist. And you might ask, how does that even happen? I don't know how that happens because I'm not a tech wizard. I just know how to put the camera on, find like a cute frame, and then talk about the things that I love to talk about, which is books. If it feels like I'm a bit annoyed, that's why. But I am very happy to be here. Like from the bottom of my heart, I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to be talking about books again because it has been a hot minute since I've spoken about books. Without further ado, because I've already done this intro 3 times now, let's get into it. So I also want to address the elephant in the room, and that is the fact that I haven't made a video in so long. And the reason being, I just haven't been reading that good of books to be doing a video, and life has been absolutely crazy lately. So I did take a little bit of a reading break. Not that I didn't read any books, but I just didn't read any of substance or that I really enjoyed or connected with. So I didn't really feel like I could come on and start talking about those books because I wasn't feeling them, you know? So I have read a lot of good books in October and I'm very excited to talk about them. I have nothing else to say, so let's just get into the video. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 books. 9 books in October. So let's start with the first book that I read. And you guys probably heard me harping on about this book for the last what feels like 12 years. This is The Ashes on the Starcoast King. I finally finished this book. It took me like 3 months to actually finish it. It is a big book, I will say. So there's like a lot of pages in it. I think it's like 600 pages all up. This is the second book in the Serpent and the Wings of Night's Nyaxia series. And it's basically a vampire romantasy series. There's 2 books and 1 novella out at the moment, and this is the second book. It basically follows our main character, Aurea, who is a human living in the vampire world. She has a father who is the king, I should say was the king, is the king of the vampire kingdom, and she goes into a contest so that she can get basically like a wish granted from the goddess of Nyaxia, because they believe in like gods and goddesses and things like that. Anyway, so she goes into this contest so that she can win a wish to turn into a vampire and be connected to her father so that she can be just as powerful as she is, because she's been told her whole life by her father that she is breakable and she is weak and she will never be like him. So that is her number 1 goal in life, to be like him. This all happens in the first book, by the way, which is a 5-star read. I absolutely love that book. And we enter this book after she meets Rain in the first book, who's also competing in the trial to win the wish from Nyaxia. Little do we know, and this is a spoiler, so skip ahead if you do want to read the first book, that Rain is actually the heir to the throne of the vampire kingdom. Aurea does not know that. She just sees a guy who is really nice to her and she kind of falls for him. Flash forward to this book, Rain has yeeted off Aurea's dad, making him the heir, and he asks Aurea, or forces Aurea more so, to marry him. So she is betrothed to Rain and she absolutely hates it, does not want to bar of him, does not trust him because he just murdered her dad. Now she is forced to be with him. I will say that is how the start of the book is, but it is not where the book takes you. The book is basically a story about war, how they're going to rule as dual rulers of the vampire kingdom. It just wasn't my cup of tea. I was really, really sad. Look, it probably is because I read it over a period of 3 months, so the story didn't really stay with me, and I just wasn't that invested in the characters. I did like it, but I didn't love it. And I think it's my own fault as well, because I had such high expectations of what the book was going to be like, and it just wasn't that at all. I just wanted more Aurea and Rain because they were so good together, but the whole time there was like no tension, there was no pining. It was just a bit like, okay, we're stuck together because we're both, you know, heirs to the throne. Let's figure out how we're going to do that. I don't know. It was a bit of a letdown, unfortunately. I had such high hopes for it, but it did not live up to them. Oh, I will say as well, guys, bit of an update. I started using Fable and I absolutely love it. There is nothing that I love more than a little aesthetic app to track my books on, and I am obsessed. So if you guys haven't heard of Fable, it's basically like an app like Goodreads. It just like is a bit more visual than Goodreads, and I really, really like it. So if you haven't looked into it, I definitely would. This is obviously not sponsored, but just my thoughts. If you're anything like me and you like something to look kind of pretty when you're using it, then yeah, you might like this. But anyway, let me go into my ratings. So I rated this one 2.5 stars, and that might seem quite low, but 2.5 stars is average, and that's exactly what this book was. It didn't wow me, it wasn't exciting, it definitely was not like the first book. The first book I rated 5 stars, but I did still love it, so I do recommend still reading it, and I think as we get more and more from this series, I'll probably end up liking it more, but it just didn't hit as hard as I wanted it to. The next book that I read was a highly anticipated read by a highly anticipated author, and that book is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. I love Sally Rooney. I've read 2 of her books so far. I've read Conversations with Friends and Normal People, and I absolutely loved both of those. I feel like the way she writes just puts you in the head of the narrator and the main protagonist so well that you just feel like you are them, and you're just like privy to their innermost thoughts, and it just feels really real and really realistic and thought-provoking because of the way she writes it, not necessarily what the plot is actually doing. With that being said, again, I didn't love this book. So we're following Peter and Ivan, and they happen to have a 10-year age gap. So Peter is the older brother and he is 35, and then or around about that. And Ivan is the younger brother and he's in his early 20s. So it's dealing with sibling relationships with an age gap and how to navigate that and relating to your sibling. And then Peter, so the older brother, has a girlfriend who is 10 years younger as well. And then Ivan has started dating a woman who is 35. So there's a lot of age gap going on here. Like the brothers have an age gap, the girlfriends have an age gap. It's all about the brothers dealing with the grief and also trying to relate to each other and build their relationship back up because their relationship is quite tumultuous. I do think it is a very thought-provoking book, as all of hers are. It just wasn't as hard-hitting for me as some of the other books that she's written. I think the chess element was pretty cool though. Like I did actually enjoy that more than I thought I would. And I will say as well that the writing style can sometimes throw people off a little bit. So if you don't know, Sally Rooney writes very differently to other authors. She doesn't use quotation marks. She writes in a way that's just kind of like a stream of consciousness. That's the word I'm looking for, the phrase I'm looking for. It's like it's a stream of consciousness, but in this case, my friend actually did a very good job of comparing it to slam poetry. I think that's very abrasive to read, so it does take a bit to get used to, but I feel like that's only one perspective. That was Peter's perspective more so than Ivan's perspective. Ivan's perspective felt a lot less jarring, so once you get through the first couple of chapters, I do feel like it's easy to digest, but the first few, just be prepared to maybe want to put this book down and DNF it, but push through it because it is a good book. It's got a lot of good themes in it, and it really just makes you think. And so this one here, I gave 3.5 stars, which I feel like is quite a high rating. Like if you think about it, 2.5 stars is average, so 3.5 is actually pretty good. It's between 2.5 and 5 in my head. The math doesn't math there, but that's okay. Anyway, so yeah, I also have Beautiful World, Where Are You on my physical TBR, so I do want to be picking that up soon. If you guys have read it, let me know if it's worth it, because when I started trying to read it, this would have been a year ago, I just couldn't get into it, and I don't know what it was. It just felt a bit political and maybe in a bit of an obnoxious way. And I hate to say it because I love her writing and I love how thought-provoking her books are, but I just wasn't feeling that one. So if you guys have read it, please convince me to read it because I really do need to get it off my shelf. I also got a new water bottle, and can you tell what my new favorite color is? I have this joke with my partner Zach that if there's something that I really want to buy, I go, well, it's in my color season, so I have to. Because I think I'm a cool summer, I assume. I think I'm a cool summer. I'm either a cool summer or a bright winter, and I know they're very different, but I feel like it just depends on the day. And I don't even know if that's a thing. But anyway, so because I'm a cool summer, this is in my summer palette. It has to be, so I have to buy it. and it's just like the prettiest color I've ever seen. The next book that I read, I'm a bit embarrassed to talk about, but I obviously have to talk about it because I've read it in October, and this is a reading wrap up. So I'm just gonna come out with it and tell you, and I don't want to hear any hate, I don't want to hear anything. I didn't enjoy it, if that's any consolation, but it's Credence by Penelope Douglas, I believe. If you don't know about this book, it is a very interesting read. It is basically following a girl whose parents are movie directors, and they both die by suicide. So it's pretty heavy off the bat. The main protagonist is grieving and really just wanting to kind of run away from her feelings and dealing with the grief that she's experiencing. So she gets into contact with with her father's stepbrother, who is technically her step uncle, who lives out in the wilderness with his two sons. And his two sons happen to be in their early 20s. And she's never met any of these people before in her life, but she decides to pack up her stuff and go and live with them. The thing about where they live is that they live in the wilderness where there's like, it's very remote. Every winter it snows in and they can never get out. Like they have to prepare to be snowed in for like 4 months of the year, every single year. They get snowed in and one thing leads to another. I hate even talking about it. Oh my gosh. Anyway, one thing leads to another, and there might be different, relations that occur, and certain acts also occur. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So it's a very interesting read. It's kind of like a car crash. You can't really look away from it. So I couldn't really stop reading it. I just had to know how it ended. I won't be reading any of her other books is all I'm going to say. I ended up rating it, I think 2 stars. Yeah, 2 stars. So yeah, probably the worst book that I've read this month. It wasn't bad. It was just messed up, I think is the best way I can describe it. Anyway, moving on. What did I read next? The next book that I read, I was so excited about because I really wanted some spooky books to read in the spooky season, because even though I'm in Australia and it is currently spring and it's hot and disgusting, everyone who I see on social media is in their fall era and Halloween's coming up and all of that kind of stuff. So everyone's reading spooky thrillers and mysteries. I just wanted to be involved. I didn't want to feel left out. So I picked up this one, We Used to Live Here. And basically this book follows 2 women who are in a queer relationship and they've just bought a house to renovate out in the wilderness. Everything spooky happens in the wilderness, unfortunately. And the house was really cheap and definitely needs a lot of work. So one day they're there, they've just moved in, unpacking boxes. Charlie, one of the women, go out for the day because they're on errands, while the other woman, Eve, is pottering around the house and unpacking furniture and whatever, unpacking the boxes. And then she gets a knock at the door and she opens it up and it's a family. So a dad, a mum, and 2 kids, or 3 kids? Maybe 3 kids. Anyway, picturesque family, and the dad goes, "Hey, we used to live here. Can I come in for a tour?" And just tell me why I would never in my right mind let anybody into my house that I didn't know, regardless of how nice they looked, regardless of the time of the day. If I'm home by myself, I'm not letting someone in the front door. Tell me why Eve is such a people pleaser that she went, "Oh, okay, no worries, that's fine. Not a single other person in sight, but yep, we'll let you in." Anyway, so she lets them in and events happen, things happen that are a bit eerie, a bit weird, and they happen to need to stay longer than anticipated. And she just can't get them out of the house. Anyway, as the story goes on, she slowly loses herself into a sense of psychosis, and it's definitely the unreliable narrator trope, which I absolutely love. I haven't read a lot of books with that trope, but I really enjoy it because you just spend the whole book trying to figure out what's real and what's not, and what's just all in her head. The only other books I can think of that I've read that have that trope are Bunny by Mona Arwood, I think her name is, Verity by Colleen Hoover, and I think that's it, to be honest. But I really like it, and I definitely want to read more books with that trope, so if you know any really good ones, please let me know. But yeah, I really loved this one actually. I gave it 4 stars overall. I think it's such a quick, spooky, eerie read. It's very atmospheric. I felt genuinely scared when I was reading it, so if you also want to feel scared, definitely pick it up. And sticking with the spooky season theme, I read another thriller. This one was actually part of my book club book of the month. Books? Does that even make sense? It was a book that was part of my book club. It was the book of the month because we do it monthly. Anyway, And that one is In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. And I've really been leaning into my mystery books lately and I'm really enjoying them. I just love how fun the plots are, and they're not usually too long, and they just keep you really gripped like the entire time you're reading them. And this was no different. So this is like a dark academia mystery thriller is the best way to describe it. It basically follows our main character who is going back to her college for a 10-year reunion with all of her college classmates. And you find out pretty early on in the book that our main character is very obsessed with how she is perceived by the world and by the people around her. And her one goal coming back to her college reunion is to show everybody how well her life turned out and how much better she is doing than everybody else. The other half of the plot is that when she was in college, there was a girl who was murdered who was part of a group of friends that she was in called the East House 7, and her name is Heather. And Heather had a lot of different interconnected relationships with the entire group of friends, the East House 7. The book basically flips through perspectives of then and now in all of the characters who are in the group of the East House 7's lives, and how they are interconnected and how they are where they are. You're trying to figure out who killed her, because it's not as it seems. That was the worst explanation I think I've ever given in my life, but you get the point. It was quite a good book. I would say it was a very digestible mystery thriller. Like, it wasn't too hard to follow along with, and sometimes I think if a book is too easy to follow along, I'm like not challenged enough and I can pick the plot points, that it isn't as good of a book. So I almost want it to be a bit confusing and a bit like, what's happening? Where is this going? Like, I want to be thinking about the plot and not just have the plot given to me. And this one definitely just gave you the plot. So even though it was like a fun read and it was very gripping, again, it's not the best book I've ever read. It's not the best thriller I've ever read. It's just like a fun, easy, quick read. It very much reminds me of like Frida McFadden's thrillers, which we'll get into in a bit. So you can probably guess, but I only gave this one 2.5 stars. Like I said, not a bad book, not a good book, definitely straight down the middle, quite average. I do recommend it if you like that kind of book. If you want something, if you're quite new to reading as well and you like a mystery book, then definitely give it a go. Then I changed it up a little bit and I picked up a book that I've been wanting to pick up for a really long time. I got this recommendation from Madison Kate, and I trust her with everything in my soul in terms of book recommendations. Like, I think we've got very similar taste. That's so funny. I think we've got very similar taste. It's not something I'd usually go for, but she definitely sold me with it. It is a young adult mystery crime series, and that is The Naturals by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This series is so fun. It's definitely young adult, but it doesn't feel young adult. It feels like fiction based on young people, not like it was written for young people. It's based on a group of individuals who are teenagers who have special abilities, and the FBI have picked up on the fact that they have special abilities. They believe that these teenagers can help them out with cold cases. So we have like a natural profiler, for example, who can work out exactly what's going on with the crime scene and who the killer could be. And then we have a natural lie detector as well, a natural emotion reader, and then someone who is very good at assessing the probability of situations and certain things happening in situations. The world building is very, very cool, and I think the concept is very, very cool as well. And it's such a short book as well. Like, this one is literally less than 300 pages, and it just flips through so quickly. It matches my color season, so how could I not love it? I gave this one 4 stars. I had to. I gave this one 4 stars. And I definitely recommend it if you are wanting to get into like a YA series. If you really liked The Good Girl's Guide to Murder, like, this is very similar in its vibes. Not so much in its plot or its characters or anything like that, or its themes, but it just gives a similar feeling to what The Good Girl's Guide to Murder gave. So if you liked that one, definitely pick this one up. The next book I've read was another really highly anticipated read, and I actually got this one very soon after it was released, but I hadn't read it for like 3 months. Maybe that's an exaggeration. Maybe 2 months. It sat on my bookshelf for a little too long, and I didn't like that, but that is Wild Eyes. And this is part of the Rose Hill series from Elsie Silver. She just does interconnected standalones so well. And this is, like I said, the second book. The first one was Wild Love. This one follows West and Skylar. And West is a horse trainer on a farm in Rose Hill, whereas Skylar is a country singer. And she is just so done with the press and so done with the limelight that she goes to Rose Hill so that she can meet up with the owner of Rose Hill Records to help record her own album and really just like take control of her own life and her own narrative, because the press have been really awful to her just in light of a few things that have happened to her recently with like her family and her partner. So she decided to take it on her own back to go out to Rose Hill and just like work on herself for herself. She runs into West within the first few chapters of the books, and he happens to save her from a bear attack because she's taking photos of a bear thinking that it's harmless, whereas in fact it is actually a grizzly bear and it could kill her. So that's kind of how they meet, and the story goes on from there. It does have 2 kids in the book. I feel like that aspect of the book really made this feel like a very full story, and you really got like a lot of different perspectives, which is really, really good. I definitely liked Wild Love more, but I still really, really love this one. I gave it 3.5 stars, so definitely pick it up if you love a little spicy cowboy romance. And then a bit of a change of tune, I picked up Something Bad Is Going to Happen, which is a lit fic book based on an Australian woman who has found herself in a mental institution. It's definitely giving the Bell Jar Australian version. If you've read the Bell Jar and you really enjoyed it, then you'll definitely like this one. It's just like Australianified. So like I feel like if you've grown up in like Australia in like a low to medium income house, you'll probably relate to this one quite a lot. Like it definitely took me a few chapters to get into it, but once I started getting into the story and the plot and everything like that and the characters, like I really related to a lot of what was going on, and I just feel like it was a very well-rounded lit fic book. I've read a few sad girl lit fic books recently, and some of them just feel like a bit whiny and a bit like your life really isn't that hard, and this one really didn't feel that way. Like I could relate to and like understand how she got to where she was, from who she was at the start of the book to who she was at the end. It touches on a lot of hard topics like grief and loss and finding yourself and mental health, even things like generational trauma and mental health issues within your family and like family dynamics as well. It was just a very well-rounded book, and it was actually a really quick book as well. Like again, under 300 pages. What more do you need? It was just so good. I definitely recommend this one. I gave this one 3.5 stars. I do feel like I could even give it 4 stars. Like I did really like it. I just find sometimes lit fic can be a little bit hard to get into, and that would be my only gripe with this book. Sometimes I feel like there's not a lot of plot happening, but again, 3.5 stars. I don't know why I'm convincing myself that it's not the right rating, because 3.5 stars is actually quite high if 2.5 is average. So there's that. And finally, the last book that I read technically shouldn't be in the October wrap up, but I make the rules here, and it is The Boyfriend by Frida McFadden. I finished this on the 2nd of November. So most of the book I read in October and only a few days in November, so it counts. This is the second book I've read by this author. I've also read The Housemaid, and I did really enjoy that. I wouldn't say it was like my favorite thriller ever. Again, they're very digestible thrillers. She tends to churn and burn them. She's released like 4 books this year, and they're never bad, but they're never good. They're usually just straight down the middle. Like they're easy to read. You can get through them really quickly, and the plot's not super complex, which is a good and a bad thing, I think. So yeah, this book follows a girl who is in her dating era, and she has some doozies of dates. She's trying to find someone who she can settle down with, and every date that she goes on is just a no until she runs into Tom. And Tom is our male protagonist who is a doctor, and he seems like the perfect man. The perfect boyfriend, if you will. We are flicking between the main female character's perspective, Sydney, and Tom's perspective when he was younger. I don't want to say too much without giving it away. There's a lot of, is he who he really says he is, and did he do the things that we think he did? And it's just a very interesting story. It is a little bit predictable, and I can't really say too much, otherwise it will give a lot of it away. But just picture a very easily digestible thriller focused on a woman in her 30s who is trying to date and find a man to settle down with, and she thinks she finds the perfect person, and not everything is as it seems. So I gave this one 2.5 stars. So again, straight down the middle. I literally didn't give a single book 5 stars this month, and I was really upset about that because I love finding a good 5-star read that I can recommend to everybody. I think the highest I rated a book was 4 stars. And they were worth 4 stars. Like, they definitely weren't 5 stars, but they were really, really good. Let's just hope that next month I actually find some 5-star reads that I like. So wish me luck. Thank you so much for watching if you've made it this far. And hopefully the next video won't be 3 months away. So I'll see you guys next time. Bye.